Nobody is telling you this. What if the reason you feel unseen aren't those people who don't get you? What if it's that you never stopped performing long enough to actually be seen? You explain yourself in every conversation. You clarify. You justify. You overshare context nobody even asked for. And still, somehow, you feel invisible. Carl Jung had an answer for this, one most people never hear, because it doesn't feel good. It feels like an accusation. Stay until the end, because the last pillar is the one that changes everything. Pillar 1, the mask you forgot you were wearing. Jung called it the persona. Not a lie exactly, a costume you built so early you forgot you put it on. The persona is the version of you built for approval. The polite one. The agreeable one. The one who laughs on time and apologizes even when they didn't do anything. Here's the part nobody says out loud. You didn't choose this mask consciously. You built it as a child. The moment you learned that your real reactions got you punished, ignored, or shamed, while your performed reactions got your love. A child doesn't reason this out. A child just adapts. Cry too much, get labeled dramatic. Say what you feel, get labeled rude. Disagree, get labeled disrespectful. So you learn, fast and quietly, which version of you gets kept and which version gets rejected. That's the birth of the persona. Not manipulation, survival. Now here's the trap. You wore that mask so long it became your default face. And when someone finally meets you, they're not meeting you. They're meeting the performance you built to be tolerated. So when they misunderstand you, you feel a strange specific pain, because on some level, you know. They didn't misunderstand you. They understood exactly what you showed them. You just didn't show them you. This is why explaining yourself never actually satisfies you. You can talk for an hour, give every detail, every context, and still walk away feeling unseen. Because you were explaining the mask, defending the performance, not revealing the person underneath it. Jung believed most adults live almost entirely from the persona. So much so that they lose track of where the mask ends and they begin. You've met these people. Maybe you are one of them. Always agreeable. Always fine. Always, no worries, it's okay. And exhausted in a way they can never explain. Because the exhaustion isn't from other people. It's from the performance itself, running 24 hours a day with no time off. Pillar 2. Why explaining yourself is a wound, not a conversation. Here's where this gets uncomfortable. If you find yourself over-explaining, constantly, in almost every relationship, it's rarely about the current conversation. It's about an old one. Somewhere back in childhood, there was a moment, maybe many moments, where your feelings were dismissed, your intentions were misjudged, and nobody stopped to ask you why. You were simply labeled too sensitive, too much, difficult, and no one corrected the record, so a part of you made a decision, silently, that this would never happen again. From now on, you'd explain everything, preemptively, thoroughly, exhaustively, so nobody could misjudge you again. This is not a personality trait. This is a nervous system still defending a case that closed years ago. Every time you explain yourself today, you are in some sense relitigating a childhood verdict that already got decided against you. And here's the cruel irony. The people you explain yourself to now usually aren't even judging you. You're doing legal defense in a courtroom that's already empty. This is what Jung meant when he talked about complexes, emotional patterns formed early that operate underneath conscious thought, reacting to the present as if it were the past. Your boss raises an eyebrow. Your partner goes quiet for a second. And suddenly, you're 12 years old again, explaining why you didn't mean it, why it's not what it looked like, why you're not what they think. Nobody in the room asked for this. Your nervous system supplied it anyway, because it's still guarding a wound that never got the chance to close. This is why over-explaining doesn't relieve you. It can't. You're not addressing the present moment. You're rerunning an old defense in front of the wrong jury, again and again, hoping this time it will finally land. It never does. Because the verdict you're fighting was never really about the facts. It was about whether you were allowed to be who you actually are. Pillar 3. Why they misunderstand you and why it isn't about you. Here's a concept that will change how you see every argument you've had. Jung called it projection. People don't see you clearly. They see you through the filter of their own unresolved material. Someone calls you cold. That might not be your temperature. That might be their history with someone who once went cold on them, replaying itself onto your face. Someone calls you arrogant. That might not be your confidence. That might be their own suppressed ambition, showing up as resentment dressed as an accusation. This doesn't mean you're always right and they're always wrong. It means most misunderstanding isn't a failure of your explanation. It's two people looking at each other through two different sets of old wounds and calling what they see the truth. This is why the more you explain, the more some people insist you're hiding something. Not because you are, because your explaining triggers their own history with people who explained right before they lied. You cannot out-explain someone else's past. You cannot out-detail someone else's projection. There is no perfect sentence, no ideal amount of context that will make someone see you clearly if what they're actually looking at is themselves. This is the moment most people get this wrong. They think, I just need to explain better. So they explain more, longer, slower, more carefully, and the other person still doesn't get it, because the problem was never the quality of the explanation. The problem is you're negotiating with a projection, not a person. Jung's insight here is almost brutal. He said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The reverse is also true. Everything that irritates them about you may say more about their inner world than it says about your character. You are not required to keep submitting evidence to a courtroom that was never fair to begin with. Here's the part almost nobody says.
What if being fully understood by everyone all the time was never actually the goal? Jung spent much of his work on a process he called individuation, becoming who you actually are, underneath the persona, underneath the performance, underneath the childhood defense system. But individuation has a price. The more you become fully, specifically, undeniably yourself, the less digestible you become to people who only accepted the version of you that made them comfortable. This is not a flaw in you. This is the actual mechanism of growth. A more defined person takes up more space, has clearer edges, says no more often, and is, by definition, less universally palatable. You cannot become fully yourself and remain equally understandable to everyone who only knew your mask.
Some of them will misunderstand you more, not less, as you become more real, because the version of you they liked was the manageable one. This is why chasing understanding as your main goal quietly keeps you small. You start editing your reactions, softening your opinions, delaying your boundaries, all to stay legible to people who benefited from your illegibility. Jung would say, this is choosing the persona over the self, again and again, until you forget there was never a difference. The people who built empires, created work that outlived them, set boundaries that changed relationships, were rarely the most understood people in the room. They were the most defined. Understanding is a byproduct some people will offer you. It was never a permission slip you needed to become yourself. Pillar 5. What to do instead, the actual protocol. This is not a mindset shift. This is a practice. Step 1. Notice the urge to explain before you act on it, not suppress it. Notice it. Ask yourself quietly, am I informing them? Or am I still defending a verdict from years ago? Step 2. Say less than feels comfortable. Not out of coldness, out of practice. Give one sentence where you used to give 5. Let the silence sit there. Most people flinch here first. That flinch is the old pattern, not a real emergency. Step 3. When someone misjudges you, pause before defending. Ask internally, is this about my actual behavior or their unresolved history? If it's theirs, you are not required to carry it for them. Step 4. Practice being seen by fewer people, more accurately instead of being seen by everyone, vaguely. This means some relationships will get quieter. That is not loss. That is filtering. Step 5. When the old wound activates the need to over-explain, to over-clarify, to over-apologize, name it out loud if you can. This is the old defense, not this moment. This single sentence interrupts decades of automatic reaction. Do this consistently, not perfectly, and something shifts. You stop performing comprehension for an audience that was never going to give you the verdict you actually needed. You stop mistaking being explained for being loved. You stop confusing being agreeable with being known. Jung never promised that becoming yourself would make you more liked. He promised it would make you whole, and a whole person doesn't need a courtroom full of people to deliver a verdict on who they're allowed to be. They've already ruled in their own favor. Stop trying to be understood. Start being undeniable.